Welcome to Business as Unusual. This is the live stream where we are discussing the pressing issues and emerging trends that are shaping our business landscapes. So, we're going to get started in a few minutes. And please enter your questions in the chat. We would love to have this be a great interactive session today. I'm Kathy Steele. I'm the CEO of Red Caffeine, and I'm your host.
She's the host of Business as
Yeah.
Unusual. Yeah.
And for those of you unfamiliar with Red Caffeine, we are a growth consultancy, and we build and execute growth plans for ambitious mid-market organizations. So that means we're launching products, we are doing branding initiatives, we just recently completed an acquisition integration, e-commerce website, so like all kinds of cool things, but everything we do relies on helping wrap around a revenue generation system. So when I think about revenue generation systems, they require process, they require tools, they require technology, and they require people. So that's what we're going to talk a lot about today. So we're in quite a paradox. We're in a time where we do have a lot of tools and technology, but it is becoming more and more complex to sell today. And despite all of these tools that we have at our fingertips, there's still some core principles that you need as salespeople. That human connection, that curiosity, that listening, all of those types of things are going to be some of the things we talk about in terms of kind of combining these modern that will help you aid sales. So I'm super excited to have Tom Lederay here. He's our co-host, and David Fisher, D-Fish for everyone that knows him. So I feel like I call you D-Fish now. So Tom, why don't you give a little intro? You know, I love to hear something that's not on your bio. David, you as well.
So I'm Tom Lederay with M3 Learning. At M3 Learning, we do sales coaching, sales leadership consulting for organizations in all spaces. We're in an interesting time, like Kathy's talking about in sales. There's this space we're teaching salespeople how to utilize these new tools, the new technology, but they also have to figure out how to do the old school techniques of two humans just interacting with each other. And boy, it's really, really interesting. I mean, I'm watching old veteran sellers struggle with communicating with the technology, and we're seeing young, new salespeople struggle with that space of, yeah, I got all the tools. Like, I don't know. Listen, I just turned 61. If I had some of these tools when I was 26, 27 years old, I'd be like, oh my gosh, I'd be crushing it. But I think there's this challenge of, yeah, I got all these tools, but now how do I still communicate with another human? And I think what's happening is the tools actually are creating a space where the people we want to communicate with are even more resistant because they think we're bots. They think we're just, and so how we become authentic. And I've known D-Fish for probably a good 10 years. I've been following him for probably 15 or 20. And I just love every day, every week, he's providing some incredible content on how salespeople need to be thinking about this differently. And I think it's going to be a fantastic conversation. So, David, love to hand it off to you.
Oh, I'm just here to listen to you say nice things about me, Tom. So thanks for helping me check that box. Everybody, thanks for joining us. My name is David Fisher. I played in a band for a long time. It's where I picked up the nickname D-Fish, and it's kind of stuck. So feel free to use it. Call me D, call me D-Fish, David. Just don't call me late for happy hour and we're good. For a long time, I ran my own sales consultancy, Rockstar Consulting. Did that for over 17 years, working with organizations as small as one person, service firms, all the way up to some of the largest names in technology, financial services, doing everything from sales skill development to sales program development. was an early adopter of using tools like LinkedIn for the sales process. In fact, I ran my first training on how to sell using LinkedIn back in 2008. So I've been doing it for a little while. And currently, I did go in-house a few years ago. I run the Global Social Selling Program for SaaS, not SaaS, but SaaS. We're a large data and AI company. So I help to lead our global sales force in using these tools to engage with our customers and make business happen. The same thing I think all of us are working on a daily basis.
All right.
So that's me.
I didn't hear a nugget, a personal nugget, Tom, but I do know you've been called out recently for your hair. So, let's just give a short round of
I was
applause.
voted in my golf league. I was voted best hair of the golf league. So that
I love it. I
Nice.
totally love it. So I think, from where we all sit, Tom and I work with an array of clients, struggling with sales. David, you have, a massive team that you're coaching. I think so. With that in mind, what are you seeing right now? What are some of the biggest trends? What are some of the biggest challenges that organizations are being faced with? Why don't you kick us off?
It's a small question, right? Go for it, Tom. You first.
Well, I'll tell you. So I'm actually on site at a client right now, SWS Equipment. They're a fantastic organization in Spokane, Washington, and I'll show you the group. We got a great group of sales professionals here, and we just started this morning off with a conversation that, the good news is these guys have over 100 years of experience in the industry with the company. The bad news is that they have over 100 years of experience, and so what got them to this point might not necessarily get them to the next point. And these guys are calling on municipalities that are literally struggling. One of the questions we ask is, tell me who are the top. They'll have 50 or 60 companies that will call on a municipality at any time. And if you ask the question, tell me who are the top 5 vendors that call on you, that bring value to you, that actually change the way you do business. Most municipalities, most customers will struggle telling you who 5 people are. They might be able to tell you 1 or 2, but by the time they get to number 3, 4, 5, it's a big struggle. And so, the challenge for us we're seeing is, how as a salesperson do I add value to my customer? And that's outside of technology and everything, but that's part of where it's really got to be grounded is, how do I utilize technology and my skills to actually provide value to customers?
Yeah, I love it. Great answer. David, what are you seeing?
Oh, I jokingly said it's a small question. Obviously, it's a massive question. And I'll actually piggyback on what Tom mentioned there, this idea of value and bringing value in a sales relationship. There are so many things that have changed, and yet so many things that have stayed the same, right? In how we interact with our prospects, our customers. I do think one of the biggest shifts in the digital concept, or what digital has done for us, is it's made information a commodity. And for those of us who have some gray hairs and have been selling for a long time, if you go back to the 70s, 80s, 90s, even before that, a salesperson's value add was information, right? Actually showing up with this year's brochure was valuable. Right. We think about
we get it
real
from the salesperson. That's the only person who had it, right?
It's the only person who had it. In the real estate business, back in the day before MLS and Zillow and all these things, the real estate agents literally were the only ones who knew what was for sale. They could bring that value. If you try to sell like that these days, you are screwed, because everybody's got all the information they could possibly want in their phone, right? Accessible at any moment. So the transition that I'm seeing successful sellers make is this idea of value provision. But I always say that value, because it's kind of a nebulous term, value is the provision of an insight or an idea that helps a person make a decision more easily, more quickly, or with less risk. So our buyers now have all the information. They have too much, but they don't know what to do with that information. I always tell sellers, you sell every day. They buy once, maybe just literally once, right? They don't know how to do this. They don't know the questions to ask, right? This idea of being a trusted advisor is so, I mean, it's so over talked about because it's become cliche, but it is actually the truth. I'm going to go back to my experience. I mentioned real estate. Like, I have a real estate agent that I work with. I've a mortgage guy that I've known for 20 years. I don't shop around. I literally just call these people because they've built the trust. They've built the expectation that I have in them that they're credible resources for me. And I do think that put all the technology on top of it, that's great. But at its core, we still have to find ways to build that bridge of trust and then continually provide the value that Tom was talking about. I'm not just here to sell you something. I'm here to make your life better. Right.
Yeah.
You've said that word at least 5 or 6 times in that answer, trust. How do I create a level of trust with my customer? And, the sad thing, David, is I think a lot of salespeople think the only way to do that is by getting the gray hairs. But how do we teach a new salesperson who's just joining the organization? And it doesn't necessarily, and when I say new, I'm not talking about age. I could be a veteran and I'm joining an organization for the first time. I'm meeting a customer for the first time. How do I develop trust on that first call? And and what are the things I can do before the first call, before the first physical call? How do I use technology to develop trust? How do I create where maybe I'm known, liked, and trusted before I actually meet the person in person, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I think that, the one thing that I've seen a lot lately is the request for personalization, or, we're being so, and for us, we're seeing a lot of clients come with an ask that is very customized, and then we're having to react with doing sort of a little bit of spec work in advance of winning a business. It's just a piece. We've done it before. We can show you how we did it for somebody else. They want to see how we're going to think about their business problem and provide some early thinking about a solution that they should be entertaining. So, I think, we're all sort of saying the same thing. It's just, there's a lot more required in that trust building part of the equation earlier in the sales conversations than I think, even a couple years ago, we were being asked for. So,
Kathy brings up, David, I'd love to ask you this question because Kathy brings up a great point. I think a lot of times what we see is the customer pushes us to education. The first conversation is, hey, I need to do this. How can you help me do this? Or I'm doing this with this competitor. How are you better, different? And how are you seeing today's salespeople not necessarily answer that question and go into, show up and throw up, but how do they actually do the discovery that's needed to build trust? How do you see salespeople doing that today?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things you can do. I don't actually think the personalization piece, Kathy, that you're talking about, I think that is overhyped. And what I mean by that is it's an easy thing for companies to sell a tool that I can personalize. And so I don't want to discount the value of it, but what we're really talking about is relevance, not personalization, right? Because personalization, somebody can go, well, I'm going to personalize the outreach email, which is just scraping something from LinkedIn and putting it in there, and that's personalized. I don't care if something's personalized to me. I care if it's relevant to me. And so, Tom, that gets to that idea of how do you do that the pre-work to make sure you can establish that trust right away. I think part of it, and this is the unsexy answer, is you actually have to put a little effort in up front. And this is, you can think about a lot of the tools we have. You can think about AI, great research tools. As you mentioned, Tom, there's things where, like you, I'm like, man, if I'd had this 20 or 30 years ago, how great would that be? But you have to use that to actually have an informed point of view when you have a conversation with a customer, right? Kathy, you have to be able to say, like, the customer's like, well, we want this, this, and this, to be able to say, like, okay, we'll do with that. But by the way, why are you asking me for this? Because you actually don't need that. It sounds to me like you're trying to answer this question. By the way, in some of my research, I was able to uncover that you have this other problem. And I've worked with other customers that have that same problem. Is this actually what's going on, right? And you start to have that conversation. It's like when you go to a doctor and you're like complaining about your like elbow, and then they ask you about something totally different. And you're like, why? But the problem's here. And they're like, it's all connected. And the whole point of what is that knowledge that the doctor has, you're going to that person saying, I want you to be able to say, yeah, you think it's this, but it's this other thing. And again, that insight, that perspective is hard to find. I can go on webmd.com and be like, I have a problem with my elbow. What's going on? So Tom, I mean, it is being able to show up with an informed perspective, which gives you that confidence to not only say, yes, I can do that for you, but also, no, I don't think that's what you want. Help me understand this a little bit more.
And also what I'm hearing, David, from you is that confidence to be able to come in and ask the question, why? That space of, okay, why did you ask for this solution and not this? Why are you going down this path? Help me understand where you are. I don't want to, a doctor wouldn't prescribe medication until they do a better, deeper discovery, right?
Yeah, I hope that we've all been in a situation where we've said, you probably won't be successful doing something, and helped a client see through that what they think is going to be the right solution, and it's really not a great match for their business, or it's really not a market problem that needs solved. And you're like, Frank, like, I can't take your money in good conscience because I don't think you're going to be successful with this. And so, there's been many times where I just don't want to like sign up for failure. So I'm just going to say, no, I can't do this particular thing you want me to do, because I just don't believe it's going to be successful. So you guys, we talked a little bit about tech throughout this, first couple of questions. My gosh, there's just so much out there. There's so many tools. I don't know what you guys find, but when we get, into a relationship with a client, a lot of times there's either very little, like they are still working on spreadsheets, or there is just every kind of tool in the toolbox and nobody is using any of them. They're like, none of these things work. Like, so talk a little bit about, technology infrastructure and some of the things that you're feeling like are great tools. What are you all seeing here?
Yeah, one thing that I've always talked to people about, and this is not just a sales approach, but really just a process approach, is the order of mindset, skill set, tool set. And the reason I always start with that is I say, what's the mindset, or what are you trying? Tom, you used this word earlier. Why? Why are you doing this? What is the goal? What is the workflow that you're trying to create? Then you can look at the skills that are going to be necessary to accomplish those goals. And then you can look at the tools, right? It's the same thing like people, process, technology, however you want to phrase it. But what I've often seen is in organization after organization is they've got them completely bass-backward, where they start with the tool and they go, we bought this new tool because we believe their marketing copy. Right. And so this is, whether it's a CRM or whatever it is, AI is a big one right now. Well, we bought the tool. So now, so now everything's perfect. Right. I get asked a lot, like, what's the perfect tool stack, your tech stack? Like, what do you need? I don't think there is one. I think it's, what are you trying to do? What is your industry? What is your organization? What is your culture? figure that out, because all tools do is scale effort. So if your effort is scale, I mean, that's literally what a tool is, a lever or an inclined plane, it scales effort. So if your effort is pointed at the wrong direction or for the wrong goal, all your tools are going to do is accelerate that, right? And accelerate your path to the wrong direction. So that being said, yeah, get the basics. Probably a spreadsheet's not going to be effective, anymore. But I also don't think you need 20 tools to be successful. I don't know, Tom, what have you seen?
I was just going to piggyback on what you're saying. I think the challenge I see is a lot of companies, they get enamored with the tools and they add tool instead of doing exactly what David said is I've got to figure out what my outcomes are, what my process is. Maybe I just, listen, I experienced it the first time we tried to implement CRM 15 or 20 years ago. I remember we were so enamored, we wanted that tool to do everything. And our salespeople were, whoa, hold on. And so we reintroduced it 6 months later. And we said, listen, we just want you to do 3 things. Just enter notes, enter your contacts, and make sure we have an updated database. And then the people who were really good at it developed it, created even more. And the people who were struggling got better at it. And I think the challenge is you've got to meet your people. And what I love about what you're saying about mindset is just because my mindset is great doesn't mean that my people's mindset is there, or my customer's mindset is there. We've got to be really thoughtful about how each of our individual people, our individual customers are reacting to this, and you can't blanket it across the board.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
I just saw like internal communication right before I hopped on this today, where they were talking about just that same thing. Like, there's so many tools we're evaluating for this client. Like, what problems are we really trying to solve? And then let's, introduce tool sets to solve problems, not introduce tools and then figure out what problems we want to solve with them.
I had an issue last week. I'm training a team of really good salespeople. And we're talking about making LinkedIn connection requests. So that's what, David, 300 characters, right? And so a really good salesperson says, well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to throw that into ChatGPT. I'll see if ChatGPT is going to give me this. And I'm like, stop it. Write it. Tell me what you want to say right now. And I was like, stop. We don't need a tool to write a 300 character email introduction, right? Can't you do that? Before you ask the tool to do it, can you do it? What's the purpose of it? Why? And I mean, it was really interesting to just have to physically work through that and go, listen, let's master the actual act before we ask the tool to do it.
That's a thing we're seeing, I think, across the board. Let's throw out there like AI in the last 3 years. By the way, such an amazingly powerful tool. And I kind of feel you have to say that. So everyone's like, oh, you hate technology. I'm like, no, it's awesome. There's Sales Navigator has some on LinkedIn has some incredible functionality that, to your point earlier, Tom, you could do some pre-work in seconds, right? But if you actually don't know how to do the thing first, the technology, that's what I was saying. Like, if you don't know the end goal, all you're going to do is get to a bad place faster. Yeah. And, with any tool, by the way, we as salespeople, we as sales organizations, we just as organizations over the last 20 years, we're starting to see the hangover happening. We have been told that tools will solve every single problem we have, right? For those of you who are old enough will remember when email itself was going to come in and revolutionize things. Does anyone remember the paperless office that was going to happen? I'm surrounded by paper. Like, the suggestion I make to anybody who's listening to this about like what is the perfect killer app right now, there is none. But look at what you're doing right now that you're doing well and it's working, and go, what is a tool that I could put into this process that would save me 10% of my time, that would get me a 10% return Don't believe the hype. I'm absolutely an AI skeptic. I'm a technology skeptic, and I do this every day, not because it's bad, but I know if I'm skeptical, I'll get rid of the fluff and I will uncover what is actually the nut that is going to help me. And so if you're feeling like overwhelmed by all these tools, I get it. Pick one and then try it for 3 months or 6 months and go, wait, this, again, I'm a fan of Sales Navigator, so I'll use that as an example. Use it and learn it and really use it, and then go, hey, is this helping? And if it is, keep doing it. And if not,
Yeah. So
pick
where
something
are
else.
you seeing Sales Navigator? Because I love the idea of that. I've been kind of preaching that internally too about like we have so many tools. Let's go inches, further with some of the tools that we have before we add something new to the stack. So where are you seeing some success with Sales Navigator? Can you talk about a few scenarios?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I think the digital space. So, Tom, going back to something you mentioned before, this idea of how do we make sure we show up with the trust, with the experience. I wrote a book a couple of years ago called Hyper Connected Selling, where I talked about being a sales Sherpa. That was like my concept, like you got to be the guide. And a lot of that was about building up your credibility and trust before you ask for something, right? So we look at tools like LinkedIn, Sales Navigator. They're a way to really broaden our reach and kind of our reputation well beyond just the people we can talk to on a moment-to-moment basis. So when you look at a tool like then Sales Navigator, which allows us to go really deep into finding the right people, finding out what's going on with those people, LinkedIn has added a lot of AI functionality within the last 18 months because they're owned by Microsoft. Microsoft wrote some really big checks to OpenAI. So then they're like, we better figure out ways to make this pay off. And I will come out and say that I'm not as fired up about some of the messaging, Tom, that you were talking about, right? If you can't write me a 2-sentence reason I should connect with you on a human-to-human level, ChatGPT or Grok isn't going to do it.
Yeah.
But where it's been super awesome, and I think that this is an amazing tool to have. For example, in Sales Navigator, there's something called Account IQ now, which will allow you to basically do a high-level dossier on any account on LinkedIn, right? They have to have over 50 people. It's not every account, but most ones you're going to sell into. And just the fact, basically, it's like having a very earnest and eager intern with not a lot of experience create like an overview for you. So yeah, you absolutely have to take it with a grain of salt because it's generative AI driven. But just to look at a salesperson and go, I'm going to give you 20 accounts, and this is where I think it's useful. I'm going to give you 20 accounts. I want you to spend 2 or 3 hours on this, and I want you to look at the listings for each of those accounts. You can look at buyer intent. There's some other stuff, but just pick the 5 that make the most sense, where you're seeing things pop up that you're like, hey, here's a gap we could fill. And that, right? And then just that prioritization, because over the years, I've talked to so many people. I'm like, what's your account list look like? They're like, well, my territory's got 500. And I go, stop. No, you can't manage 5. Who are the 10? Who are the 15? So the fact that instead of spending a day, you can spend an hour to take that list of 20 or 30 or 50 and make it 5 or 10. That's probably one of the easiest places I see a salesperson saving their time.
Plus, I think what's interesting is, the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule. 20% of my customers give me 80% of my business.
Yeah.
One of the biggest challenges I see with a lot of sales organizations and salespeople is we're so worried about the breadth that, like you said, David, we don't focus on that upper 10%. And sometimes if we dove deeper into our best accounts, we might actually find leverage in different departments. We might find leverage in different relationships. And before you know it, we grow our sales another 30, 40, 50, 60% with existing accounts. When I was a new salesperson, the Miller Heiman Blue Sheet was a big deal. Yeah. That's how you would figure out how you would navigate inside of a company. And it could take you months to fill out the Miller Heiman Blue Sheet. Now you literally can fill that out in an hour. with some research, you can have a really good idea of how you can navigate through that in a way you couldn't do that 10 years ago.
Yeah, I mean,
Absolutely.
same. I think the research aspects of AI, it's getting so much better. I mean, pretty early adopter, love playing, with variations, love challenging myself to get more out of it. So, but I'm blown away by how much of a time saver it is for, especially if you're going after a larger enterprise piece of business, because there's so much publicly available information
Yep.
out there. And then to be able to parse it down to what you need, quickly, I think those are just some things that used to just take 4 and 5 hours of research that are only taking an hour. Now, fact checking is important, but like I was like going to meet with somebody and I was using AI early on, and I'm like, oh, that's so interesting that their CEO's name is John Doe. And then I was like, is their CEO named John Doe? And I then fact check it, and I thought, oh, I'd totally make an ass out of myself in the meeting if I would have said, hey,
So,
this
Mr.
is
Doe.
John Doe. So yeah, so you definitely have those little bloopers and problems with AI, but overall, I think it's just really, really additive in terms of getting time back in the research process.
Yeah, I'm chuckling because I remember going to the library to do research early in my sales career. Yeah, but literally, you'd have to go to the library because they'd have the subscriptions to the trade magazines you wanted to read. So I'm going to flip this though. So I want to go back to take it back to what Tom was saying. So we're talking about tools and technology, this time savings that AI gives us. And what's really interesting is I've just noticed that there's a lot of talk about the time savings, the efficiencies that AI can drive. 100% agree. There's not as much talk about the effectiveness improvement. And oh, this is going to help you close more, because what I think it actually really gets to is, Tom, something I'm sure you run into a lot. Having this background information, it's still just it's going to become table stakes. Like if a tool or the information that you have access to through that tool is your differentiator, you don't have a differentiator because anybody else can pony up for that tool. It's what you do with it.
Yep.
Right. So what I really think is going to be the differentiator. We've also, again, I think over the last 20 years, we've had such an ability in sales to do outreach at scale with minimal cost, right? If you think about how we used to go back 40 years, if you wanted to send a newsletter, you literally sent a newsletter in the mail. I remember my dad was a president of an organization, being a kid, and he wanted to get the bulk rate. So we were all kids separating by zip code. I mean, that's why, again, in the early 2000s, it was wait, we push a button and 1,000 people get this?
Yeah.
But we've become inured to that as buyers. I don't open up cold outreach. You can't get a hold of me that way. And I'm not even that high up in the organization. I'm just busy and I got 2 little kids and, stuff going on. So if you're just I'm going to do more, that way madness lies. If you instead go, okay, I'm going to pick these 10 people, and Tom, I love what you said, here's my 10 best accounts. How do I get deeper in those? Or if here's my 10 accounts, I just need 2 more exactly like this. Let me do the work up front and get in deeper with a couple prospects that are similar versus I'm going to email out another 10,000 people, probably, ruin my brand, definitely ruin my, personal brand, and hope something happens.
We were talking in the group I'm with today, and I'll see this happen a lot with salespeople. We'll have a meeting at 10 o'clock with Jim. And, in today's world, people are changing jobs every 2 to 5 years. And so the salesperson walks past 15 people in the organization, meets with Jim, has one relationship, maybe 1 or 2 in the organization, but they're walking past maybe 8, 10 people who 5 years from now are going to be powerful people that are making decisions either inside that company or at a different company. Right. And our ability to use the tools today to create relationships, to create trust inside of the organizations we're working at. Instead of becoming single-threaded, we become multi-threaded inside that company. And I know everybody, it's almost become, cliche. Well, you got to be multi-threaded, but we've all had that challenge where we've got one or two strong relationships, one person leaves, and we got to start everything over. And we're missing incredible opportunities to become to get higher, wider, and deeper inside of existing accounts. And I think that's probably one of the biggest places I would force a sales team to utilize technology is,
100%.
am I getting everything that I can? And do I have the depth of relationship that I need?
Yeah. I mean, think about LinkedIn specifically on this. It used to be that you could only maybe meet those new people if you went to the office and walked past their office or desk. The fact that you can say, okay, I know Tom and Kathy well, these are my champions, my points of contact, they're into it. I know there's other influencers, other stakeholders. There's a financial and probably a legal stakeholder as well. I always say there's the people that can say yes, and then there's the people that can say no, and you better know both of them. And the fact that with LinkedIn, just go there and go, okay, well, I know Tom and Kathy, but it looks like Susan's going to be important here, or based on her title, I think, Jill's going to be involved. Either I'm going to ask Tom or Kathy to introduce me, or I'm just going to reach out with a really quick connection request. Hey, I'm working with Tom and Kathy. This might not be relevant, but if something comes up, wanted to reach out and connect. And then the key is to let it sit there. Like, don't then go, Susan accepts. I'm like, great, can I have a meeting with you? Just be like, all right. But build that up.
Susan,
that's an old
great
school
to be
technique,
connected.
right?
Oh, what an honor to be connected with you. I can't wait to learn more about you. And then who knows where that relationship's going to go. Yeah.
Tom, so above and below the line.
Yeah.
Above and below the line selling, like typical M3 methodology. But I think we've all been in that situation where we think we're going to close something, and then all of a sudden a CFO gets introduced like 4 months later, and you're like, I didn't think they were going to be involved in the decision-making process. So, getting in front of building those relationships throughout an organization is really cool. Coming back, have you done anything where you're using those AI agents? Have you had any experiences with that technology?
I've reviewed some of it. That's as far as I've gotten.
Okay.
We've actually done some interesting things. We've been working with some folks who are helping us take our M3 methodology, incorporating it into M3, like a relationship igniter, something where you can actually do some of that work to actually go in and maybe have better outreach that then ties into how I create value, how I find the problem, and get it very specific inside the industry, get it specific inside of the title, all of that. And it's fascinating. The work that would take hours, all of a sudden we're doing in 10 or 15 minutes. And the biggest key though we're seeing is you can't just blanket 1,000 emails. It's that space of, okay, now how are you going to make it relevant? How are you going to personalize it? So I love what you said, David. I think it's that space of, I'm going to create the tool, but then how do I make sure that I'm still being personal and relevant?
Yeah, I feel like it leans right into, the human skills. I think David talked about it. Just because you have a tool, you have to know what you're trying to do with the tool, and a tool's not going to do it for you. So, talk a little bit about some of those core foundational skills that are so important for sellers right now.
I don't think that I find it interesting that you put the term right now or the modifier right now at the end, because we like to think that way, like, oh, things have changed because of technology. But in some ways, I think it really is just old school. We use that term a lot in sales, old school, because those of us, you grew up with the Zig Ziglars or the Brian Tracys or even the earlier than that. Humans, Dale Carnegie is one of my, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Great book. If you haven't read it, go read it. I think it's worth reading, even though it's 90 years old. The language is a little dated, but humans haven't changed. And I think that is something that has always been core to the work that I do, even around technology and sales, is humans don't evolve in decades. We evolve over millennia. So trust is still about me being able to connect with you as a human being. We have big brains not to do quadratic formulas. We have big brains for relationships. Like, that's what most of our brains were evolved to do, is for us to connect, us to build trust, so I could know that Tom was going to help me find food and protect me if the saber-toothed tiger came. And I say all this because let's not overcomplicate it. It's the same skills that help us in our personal lives. I always, when I train people on networking, I go, has anybody ever built a relationship? Does anybody have a friend? And okay, great. You know how to network. You've got those skills. We have to be intentional about them. But I mean, Tom, you're 9, but I mean, it's trust. It's, curiosity. It's, some confidence for sure. I mean, and empathy is the other word that's just thrown around a lot right now. But what is human empathy? It's just understanding that the person you're talking to, they have needs, they have wants, they have challenges and problems. So you got to be able to think from their perspective. And, that's not always easy to do, especially because technology is an empathy killer. So,
Kathy, as Skip used to say, our founder before he passed away, used to say, people don't want to be educated. They want to be validated. And I think it's this really interesting space of, as salespeople, we want to come in and we want to educate and we want to talk about us. But the reality is, every human being wants to feel heard, understood, be validated. Our president, Christine, tells a story about, for 20 years, the second thing on her LinkedIn profile is that she runs a dog rescue operation. In 20 years, only 2 salespeople have ever asked her a question about the dog rescue service. And she took both of those meetings. And so,
wow.
It's crazy. I mean, the information is out there. The tools are showing this, and we still have to teach people how to use those tools and why that's important, right? It's important because Christine wants to be validated about the decisions that she's made and what's important to her.
Yeah, I mean, I think about experience too. I think when you're a younger seller, you don't quite all the tools that you have when you've faced a lot of crazy questions that you are not expecting in a conversation, or somebody, like I mentioned, a CFO walks in the room that you weren't expected far along in the sales process. So what else can you arm newer sellers with that won't have experience?
I think the biggest thing I've coached a lot of young sellers over the years, I think the ones that are successful lean into their inexperience. And what I mean by that is they don't pretend that they are knowledgeable, or that, not that extreme. They don't pretend to be experts, right? They can be knowledgeable, but they're not trying to say, hey, I've got, 50 years of experience. But the ones who show up and they're like, hey, I am, in this role a little newer, but if I can't find the answer, I'll find the answer. If I don't know can't give you the info you need, I'll get the info. But they're the ones who also show up on a very human level, that curiosity, that validation that Tom's talking about. And I've worked with very successful younger sellers who don't have the years and years of experience, but they're often the ones that are like sponges, right? And they're not pretending to be anything they're not, but they're willing to work hard. They're putting in the enthusiasm. Like, they'll take these tools and get the information and then go, okay, well, how do I use this? How do I find a mentor? How do I work with other people who are experienced? What should I tell them? That's what I've seen, is like, you don't have to pretend you know everything, but you really have to over-index on that human side.
Yeah. The other thing I'm seeing, and David, I'd love to ask you about this, is, in a lot of larger organizations, sometimes the most senior folks have that place of, oh, well, I don't necessarily need to be on LinkedIn or on any of these, and they miss the opportunity. I think what happens is their relationships, their network can actually help the new salespeople in those organizations in a way that if as a team they're not leveraging that in a powerful way, you can miss some incredible opportunities to create trust inside an organization, even if it's my first visit and I've only got 3 months of experience.
100%. I think that's not only in large organizations, but in fact, I think it's more powerful for smaller ones, right? If you think about that organization with 20, 30, 40 people total, maybe there's only 5 or 10 salespeople. Usually you've got that experienced individual or couple who've got that great network. If they can open up their network and they, invite the rest of the team in, and they're making more connections and making introductions, a rising tide raises all ships. That doesn't take anything away from those top sellers. In fact, it helps them be more successful.
When I work with any organization, one of the first things I look at is, are you in this room? Are you all mutually connected to each other? And I'm going to tell you, it's never more than 50% of the people are connected to all of their peers. And that's one of the easiest things you can do to expand your network inside of an organization, is just make sure you're all connected to each other so that you're all sharing your networks, right?
Yeah. Well, and let's face it, we're not all going to work at the same company forever. So as people move and evolve, I was actually listening to an interview where somebody in the entertainment business was sharing how when he was younger, he didn't realize that assistant is not or every assistant is on a career path, I think is the way he put it. So be nice to the assistants, because eventually those are the decision makers. And even just like your peers, right? They might go to another company that might become a prospect for you in a different role. Make the connections when you can, when they're easy, because that's how you get into the doors later on.
I saw a study that said by the time somebody's 35 today, they've got 9 jobs. Now, in my career, most average people had 5, 6. We almost have to understand that every 2 to 3 years, people are either getting promoted, they're looking to leave, and we're missing those opportunities when we don't connect with the people. Yeah, maybe they're not going to influence the decision today, but 3 years from now, they may be somebody that is going to be really important for me to know.
Yeah.
Right.
I honestly just get kind of a lot of joy when I see some of my former employees post something about their successful career journey, and then all the people that comment are other either former employees or current employees. Like, they're still cheerleading for, RC team members, regardless if they're working for us still or they've moved on. So I think there's just something powerful there.
I've got one question. I'm working with a group of folks today who are calling on municipalities. And one of the comments that was made here this morning when we were having this conversation was, yeah, but my customers, my municipalities aren't really active on LinkedIn. And then it was a ... today. What would be the advice that you would give a group like this that is, trying to see, okay, do I need to look into the future? What would that look like? Is there an opportunity for me? What would you say, David?
Yeah, I think the first thing to remember is that no, not everybody is active on LinkedIn, regardless of industry. I think it's often a mistake to think that we can only use a chat channel if it's a universal channel, right? Meaning, oh, well, everybody does this one. We're in too fragmented a world communication channel wise to just expect that. Again, like if you text me and I don't know you, you'll never, like, I don't respond. But if you email me, like, I'll at least see it, right? Because I use email. That's just me personally. Same thing. If you send me a LinkedIn message, I'm going to see it because I'm there a lot. So I think we have to understand that not every channel has to be universally used to be valued. Even if it's only 10 or 20% of their market or their customers, those contacts are there, that I think there's value in that today. I think the other thing, especially with LinkedIn, you actually don't know how much activity your prospects are involved with on channels. Especially, so what I'm really hearing when somebody says this to me, I'm like, oh, your prospects don't post a lot of content on LinkedIn. Totally valid, right? Totally valid. And if they don't, then there's some tactics we can't use. But they have a LinkedIn account, like there's a 1.1 billion, and most people just go and lurk, right? And they do scroll through. So, hey, if they're not as active, they only got 200 connections, man, you better be one of them, because when they do go to LinkedIn, there's a good chance they'll see your post, right? Again,
Plus, there's so many times people will come to me and they'll go, I see your post all the time. And I'll go, you've never liked it. You've never commented. How? I don't even know you see it. And they're like, oh, I see you all the time. I follow you. And I'm like, wait a minute.
I'm very active on LinkedIn. By the way, organic reach for the last 18 months has actually decreased on LinkedIn. It is what it is. But if I have a post that 1,000 people see, that's like 1,000 impressions. First of all, for us in sales, how awesome is that, right? For what might take 10 minutes to get 1,000 people to view, just see your name. I mean, that name recognition alone is huge. But if I have 1,000 views, I might have 20, 25 likes, which is great, maybe 5 or 10 comments. So I love that engagement. But that means that there's like 960 people who I don't know who they are, but they saw it. Yeah. So to your point, I mean, I get it all the time. Oh, I see you're doing this and that and the other thing. I'm like, how do you know that? They're like, oh, your LinkedIn post.
All the time. Same. You're everywhere. And I'm like, really, I'm not. I feel like I could be doing a lot more. But it is really interesting the social presence is pretty powerful. You just don't even realize how many people are seeing your posts because of,
You asked about, Tommy, asked about trust. There's actually a lot of signs that one of the biggest bedrocks of trust is familiarity. We trust things that are familiar to us. Well, start showing up all the time. So when they do go out, I mean, just this one little channel we're talking about, LinkedIn, great. You think about trade shows and events and showing up to people's offices. Half of what you're just trying to do is make yourself familiar to them to make it easy to trust.
But you're right, Tom, that municipality space is challenging. I do feel like that category tends to do a lot more events. And so, that to me is an opportunity to get some more face-to-face opportunities by attending, industry type events and being able to create those relationships.
But then it's also, like David said, it's interesting because there are some of these really innovative municipalities that are really active, that
exactly.
They have Instagram, they have an Instagram account, they got TikTok channels, and they're talking about water and they're talking about sewer water. And you're like, wow, that's interesting. But they're trying to become relevant to their constituents, which are the residents and the businesses of their municipality.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, we work in that space as well. And we definitely are encouraging a lot more social presence for our municipality clients, for sure. Because it goes a long way in creating that visibility for whatever, value that community is bringing in attracting new businesses or new residents to it. So, I think that's the question is that there are so many channels, like there are so many ways people want to be communicated with. I mean, like sometimes I'm just like, I cannot get on another channel. I just cannot handle talking or keeping track of a dialogue in 7, 8 different places. So what are you guys doing in terms of those types of situations with sellers? How are you helping them, coach them to, reaching people where they want to communicate?
I think it's about, I think it's about going where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck. And what I mean by that is not trying to blanket every social platform. I mean, I think we're seeing some evolution. A couple of years ago, it was like, oh, you got to be on Facebook and Twitter and all the big ones. You got to be there all the time. It's not quite the same these days. We are a little bit more fragmented, but I think you just ask, hey, where are the majority of the people that I want to talk to going to be? We'll stick with municipalities. And again, if you're listening in a different industry, just tweak this. But if I was going to sell in municipalities, now there's a lot of events. I know that LinkedIn should be valuable for my digital channels and YouTube. I actually worked with some industrial salespeople, and this guy who sold farm equipment was like, "Our YouTube channels get millions of hits."
Yeah.
Crazy.
He's like, "All the farmers are just sitting there on their tractors," and I'm like, "Okay, great. So you should be there." But just pick a few and go, like, we're going to have a great event strategy. We're going to integrate that with a good LinkedIn follow-up and pre-event and post, like, that's it. And then again, I'm in YouTube, like, go in on just a couple, knowing you're going to miss out on some of the other channels, and be okay with that, right? Because you got to go deep in a couple. Like the idea of broad and just a couple inches deep, it's you can't cut through the noise doing that. So just
and
pick
I
a
would
couple
say,
places.
and my value is not the client's value. I think the biggest thing you can do is just ask the question.
Right.
What's the best way? Do you like text? Do you like voicemail? Do you like email? Do you look at LinkedIn? Salespeople just need to get better at asking the question and then putting it in their CRM and going, okay, here's the best way to get a hold of this person.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you. I'd love to ask just one final question. As you're kind of thinking about where we're at, I really loved the idea that we were, humans haven't really changed and really creating that human connection. I love that. Although I will use a chat bot for customer service now that they're getting in better, I'd much rather go down that than try and reach somebody on the phone. But is there just some final thought you want to share with our guests today, our audience today?
The biggest, and I think you touched on it, it's the human experience is one that, if you think about what sales has been for a long time, it has always been about the ability to interact with people. We talk about sales skills and human skills are kind of the same. Not quite, but there's a good overlap. Find ways to practice those skills. Find ways to invest in spending time in those skills. Those aren't going to be replaced anytime soon.
Yeah, and what I would say is, I think we need to be more curious. We need to up our curiosity quotient, whatever that is, that space of just being okay with really being interested, diving deep, and being more curious.
Yeah, well, I think you just coined something. There's going to be a new app, CQ app, the Curious Quotient app.
I should have copyrighted that before I said it.
Exactly. Thank you. Well, thanks for everyone who attended. Thanks to you, David, for joining us today. We always like to give a shout out to how to reach you. If you want to connect with David, we put his LinkedIn address on here, as well as his email. Please put business as unusual in the subject line so he knows it's coming from here. And then
I'm going to say, if you are a salesperson and you are not connected to D-Fish and you are not following his content, you are missing out. 3-4 times a week, there is incredible content that he is just sharing. And what if there was a tool, a free tool, by the way, that would fill your brain with some great information? So you need to be connected to David.
Great plug. Thank you. And then I obviously want to thank you, Tom, and M3. We love our partnership with you, as well as HR Source. You guys just, it's just great to collaborate on bringing great content to business people, salespeople, and C-suite leaders. We want to give a little bit of a shout out to our next event that's coming up in July. We are keeping on the sales conversations. We're going to have 2 of our team talking about the revenue reset. We're going to lean in to some of the insights that you can glean from your CRM, really using those kinds of data points to improve your sales process, catch opportunities to mature your funnel or move your funnel along a little bit better. I think we all have these great technologies, and we're going to talk a lot about how to use these technologies to improve your sales strategies. That's coming up on July 10th. And with that, I want to, thank you guys both again for joining me, Tom and David. It was a great conversation. I'm sure we could have gone on and on. There's just so much to talk about here, but I appreciate you joining us today. And, for our audience, keep challenging the usual, and we'll see you in July.